Hey, football fans, welcome to the channel that takes you deep inside the San Francisco 49ers. OTAs are about ready to kick off, and the 49ers are all about competition. So, in today's episode, what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at the 5 big competitions to look for as everybody gets ready for OTAs. Now, those OTA practices started earlier today on Monday. They're going to be going today. There'll be a practice tomorrow and then another one on Thursday. That'll be week 1 of OTAs. There'll be another 3 practices next week, 3 more the week after that. And then we'll get to the mini camp, finally, the second week of June. That's the direction of this for the 49ers in their offseason program. The other thing to think about here is the media is only going to be there one day each week until they get to mini camp. That mini camp, that changes at that point. The media will be able to be there all of the days of the camp, whether it's 1, 2, or 3. Last year, they reduced it from 3 down to 2. So we'll see how that plays out. But as we head into this mini camp, the one thing to remember when you look at the 49ers, it's all about competition. Creating a competitive environment has been among the core beliefs that the 49ers have built since John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan arrived in Santa Clara. In fact, while speaking to the NFL Scouting Combine just a couple months ago, Lynch noted that competition is a great thing. It brings out the best in everybody. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and let's take a look at 5 key competitions to keep an eye on during this OTA period. And if there's any others that you have, make sure you put them over in the comment section. I'll get to those as well. So let's go through this. We're going to start off with, obviously, the one that everybody's been talking about this offseason, the quarterbacks. The quarterbacks have been the hot topic around the 49ers. They've been a hot topic around the 49ers for a long time. It's not just this offseason. It's been going back into the early 80s when you had Joe Montana, Steve Young, even really before that a little bit with Steve DeBerg and Joe Montana back at that point. So quarterbacks have always been a hot topic around the San Francisco 49ers franchise. This is a quarterback-rich franchise when you look at the history here. So let's take a look and see what this battle is going to look like. You know, Kyle Shanahan, he was asked during the owners' meeting back in April if Lance and Darnold are going to be competing this offseason. Shanahan said that he expects both of them to get first-team reps, and he was very specific about when those reps are going to be occurring. He said, but I'd like to see them in phase 1 of OTAs. Then we'll get them on the field in phase 2. And then in OTAs, I expect them both to get reps with the first team, but we'll see how that goes. So all this talk about the quarterback situation between Trey Lance, Sam Darnold in particular, it's all coming to a head starting today. It started already. We'll get our first glimpse of it as a media group tomorrow, so we can actually report to you tomorrow what that looked like. That's definitely going to be the number one hot topic around this entire offseason program. Now, remember, Brock Purdy isn't able to participate at this point because of he's still returning from the UCL surgery that he had. The next update on Purdy will come around June 2nd. The 49ers have said it's going to be 12 weeks post-surgery. That's June 2nd, so right around that last Friday. That's actually during the final round of OTAs for the 49ers. So keep it locked in. We'll see how that plays out. You know, you start to look at this, and let's talk about, first off, Trey Lance. Lance has recovered from the broken ankle, which sidelined him for all but 5 quarters last season. He's been working hard on his throwing motion. And if you look at the early reports and you hear what's been said, whether it was Kyle Shanahan, John Lynch has said how good he looks as well, or even his coach that he's working with in conjunction with Patrick Mahomes this offseason, Lance has really turned the corner with some of the mechanical issues that he's been dealing with. And some of those issues with mechanics go back to the finger injury that he suffered during the final preseason game of the 2021 season during his rookie year there. So it's good that he's been able to rework his throwing mechanics. They're all positive, and it's going to be interesting to see what that actually looks like. Because one of the things when you start looking at Lance on the practice field, having watched Lance in practice since the time he joined the 49ers, one of the main things is that you can get a sense early on in the practice how Trey Lance's day is going to go. The 49ers will generally start out their practice sessions. The quarterbacks are working with Brian Griese, and they're working on their own. They're just throwing the ball to the ball boys, and they have them set up, and they'll have them throw some specific, like, predetermined plays, and this is where the landmarks would be for those plays, that type of thing. And when you watch Trey Lance go through that, there's a number of times, especially last year and a little bit even his rookie year, where you would see him struggle with his accuracy at that point in practice. And then they get it from that point. They start to throw to receiver, so that gives you another look at it. So we'll get a pretty good idea right away, I think, when it comes to Trey Lance with where he is. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what this new motion looks like. Looking to see if he's as accurate as all the reports have been. This one's also going to be interesting because this will be the first time where they've actually had some live competition to go against. Up until this point in the OTA process, they have not been competing in terms of offense and defense. So this will be that first glimpse of that as well. The other thing is not everybody's going to be there. It'll be interesting to see who shows up, who doesn't. Deebo Samuel obviously wasn't there during OTAs last year because of his contract situation. I wouldn't expect to necessarily see him there. So we'll see who he's throwing to as well in terms of Trey Lance. And then opposite of Trey Lance in this deal is Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold's been the talk of the town. You see a number of national high-profile media members talking about Darnold being the guy that could be the starting quarterback week one for the 49ers if Brock Purdy's not able to go. Just been a lot of smoke around Sam Darnold this offseason, and we haven't had a chance to see him yet as a press corps. But when you look at it, you look at Darnold. The situation here is he's coming to San Francisco, which gives him the best situation he's been in his career. He hasn't been in a situation where he has as many playmakers as you have in San Francisco. I mean, heck, Christian McCaffrey, we know he's one of the primary playmakers, but even McCaffrey last week during an interview with NFL Network talked about how stepping into the huddle with the 49ers was like stepping into the huddle of a Pro Bowl roster, stepping into the huddle at the Pro Bowl with, all the guys you have, Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel and George Kittle and Kyle Juszczyk and Trent Williams and all those guys that you have along that offensive group. And that's just the starting group. And they go a little bit deeper than that when you get into Jawan Jennings and how good he's been for the 49ers. And so this is a totally different situation. Plus he has Kyle Shanahan, and Kyle Shanahan is a guy who does a great job of scheming wide receivers open. If you look through, one of the biggest knocks that I've heard this offseason when it comes to Brock Purdy is he didn't have to worry about tight window throws. For the most part, the guys were wide open. They're schemed wide open. He's able to make throws easy. Well, that's fine, and that's great. I don't think that should change. I don't think it's going to change whether the quarterback is Trey Lance or Sam Darnold. And if Sam Darnold doesn't have to try to fit the ball in the tight windows all the time, and he's able to just rely on his arm talent and get the ball to the right guy, we'll see how that all performs. He may be able to do really well in this offense. One thing that even his head coach has talked about is that Darnold has as good of a skill set as there is out there. That's why he was the third pick in the draft. And then when you study his play, you see it. He hasn't always been in the best situations, Shanahan said. That's tough for a quarterback, but he's done some really good things in this league. And that's clear when you watch the film. If you want to, you can make a heck of a highlight clip, cut up of Sam Darnold. And you could put a heck of a low light clip together too. And it's very similar for Trey Lance. And there's a difference there, right? There's a lot more of those highlights and a lot more of those low lights for Darnold than there is for Lance, because Lance just hasn't had as much time to play. So we're going to get that opportunity on Tuesday to really see this thing start to play out. So it's going to be very interesting to see how this whole thing unfolds. We got the East Coast Red and Gold podcast. And hi, Jack. How you guys all doing? Hope you're doing well out there. You guys put on a great show. I saw the one with Randy Cross recently, so keep up the good work. EF Borgomini says, pending Brock's return, safe to say Trey is QB1. I don't know if it's safe to say that Trey Lance is QB1. There's going to be a competition. I think and that's not my words. That's Kyle Shanahan. He has said that there's going to be a competition. Do I think that Trey Lance can win that competition? Absolutely. Trey Lance has a ton of potential. If he's able to fulfill that potential, the sky's the limit for this kid. And I say kid because he's a lot younger than me. For this young quarterback, he's got a ton of talent. Doesn't have a lot of throws under his belt, and that goes back. You look through it, and I think it's a small number overall of throws for Trey Lance in his career. You even go back to, I think he's at 103 with the 49ers. He was around 287, I think, was the number of throws he had in his one season as a full-time starter at North Dakota State. Then he had like 30 the next week in the next season in the one game that he played, and so on. So not a lot of throws in North Dakota State. And then even when you go back to his high school days, his senior in high school, according to the stats I was able to look up, he only had about 113 throws there. So that's the issue, I think, for Trey Lance. He hasn't played enough. There's a lot of potential. We know he has the arm talent. We know he can run. Can he handle the entire game, though, once you put him on the field? We know that he's really good at the whiteboard. We know that he can get up there, and we know that he can tell the coaches everything that needs to happen. Can he transition that to the field? We haven't seen that yet, but the reason we haven't seen it yet is because he hasn't been healthy That's the biggest one, right? The health injuries. Got the start in Arizona. His rookie year was injured, so he wasn't able to play the next week, even though the 49ers and Kyle Shanahan have said that he was bummed about that because they had some things that they thought they would continue to do with him. That just hasn't happened. Last year was supposed to be his big year. It's going to be his season to learn. And, there was some good and some bad in week one out in Chicago. The 49ers lose the game. And then you come home and you finally get the good weather. And he only lasts a quarter. He gets injured on the run there. And just a tough break for Lance and for the 49ers, too, to really know where they are. So as far as safe to say Trey is QB1, what I would say is that Trey Lance has the inside track to be QB1, right? If you were to tier these guys off, Brock Purdy is 1, Lance is 2, Darnold's 3, right? So in order for Darnold to get above Lance, he needs to show that he's better. He can't show that he's the same. If he's at the same level, then Lance stays the guy. Darnold's got to beat him out. Just like I've said all offseason, that if Lance wants to be the starter, he needs to clearly be better than Brock Purdy. He hasn't shown that yet on film, so we'll see how that works. We've got a Toolbox member in the house. Brian Culp says, "What's up, Jack? How you doing?" And he also likes the Batman shirt, the Superman shirt for me. I got the Superman one on instead of the Batman one. He says, "Hit the like button, everyone. Share, subscribe, comment. Yes, please do." Terradome in the house says, "What up, Jack?" And Bryant says that Clark Kent played quarterback. That's who we need. Hey, if Clark Kent was the quarterback, we can get him. We know he could score because he just run through everybody. Run through everybody and be able to jump over everybody. So that's how I see the quarterback situation. Lance, Darnold. Lance needs to be much better than Purdy to win that job, just like Darnold needs to be much better than Lance to win the backup job, or knock him out for even the starter week one if Purdy's not able to be healthy. So we'll see how that plays out. But that's number one. The number one battle to keep an eye on started today, but tomorrow we'll get a chance to look at it live, is at the quarterback position. Next up for me is the right side of the offensive line. I say the right side of the offensive line because I think when you look at this team, that's where the changes are occurring. You have Mike McGlinchey. He's no longer there. He's now out in Denver. Big free agency deal that he was signed with the Broncos. I got a lot of money to go out there. So now the 49ers have Colton McKivitz slated as the first guy up to play right tackle. And so this is an interesting one, though. You start to look at it and, is Colton McKivitz really the guy? The hard part about it here is he just doesn't have very many snaps, right? You look at McKivitz. This is a guy that was taken the 5th round of the draft back in 2020. He's only made 2 starts at tackle over the last couple of seasons. He made 3 starts his rookie year. And the biggest thing for McKivitz is just a lack of snaps. You look at the last 3 years. So since McKivitz came into the league, he's played 439 snaps. Out of those 439 snaps, 138 of those have come in the last 2 years. So he played over 300 snaps his rookie year, but he's only played about 189 snaps. I think he does 179 snaps, right in that ballpark, over the last 2 seasons. He just hasn't played very much. He had one game where he had 70. I think the other one was 68. So what's that? Whatever that number is. So in terms of the total number of snaps, it's a low number for McKivitz. And you compare him to a guy like Matt Pryor, a veteran that the 49ers signed during free agency. Matt Pryor struggled quite a bit in Indianapolis last year. He was with Philadelphia before that. But Pryor's a guy that's been around the NFL a lot. He's played over 1,800 snaps over the last 3 seasons compared to McKivitz. And the other guy that's kind of competing in that spot right now would be Jalen Moore as well. Moore was taken in the 2021 draft. Moore's played only 330 snaps for his entire career. So you start to look at these names, and if McKivitz is going to be the guy, he's going to have to really show it. That's the name that the 49ers have talked about. They've talked about how well he's done. The one thing that I'll say with McKivitz, when you've watched him play the couple of games that he's been in there, the 49ers have been able to win with Colton McKivitz, right? They went down to Los Angeles at the end of the 2021 season. He starts in place of Trent Williams at left tackle. It was a rough game for him when it comes to pass protection. He struggled at times, but the 49ers were able to work around it. They fell behind 17-0 before coming back to win that game. And then he made his next start the following season again against the Rams, but this time at Levi Stadium, again in place of Trent Williams. And he played much better. Didn't seem to be quite as much of a liability in pass protection as he had been the year before. So we'll see how this all pans out. I think when you look at McKivitz, his strength is the run blocking. He's a really good run blocker. That's of the 2 skill sets, pass blocking and run blocking. For Colton McKivitz, the run blocking is better. It's kind of the same thing though they have with Mike McGlinchey. So we'll see where that lines up. And then also, like I said, you have Jalen Moore. I don't think Jalen Moore. We'll see how that all plays out. Jalen Moore, when he got onto the field last year, he looked lost. He didn't look good in training camp last year either. So we'll see where he looks this season if he's able to show some improvement there. We won't get much of a look at it this time because I'm not sure how much we won't see them do like the one-on-one drills or any of those types of things. But we'll get a chance to see what his body looks like and how well he's moving. And then the same thing there with Matt Pryor. So you got McKivitz at number 1, and then you have Matt Pryor probably at 2, and then you have Moore. And then another name to keep an eye on here is Spencer Burford. I don't know what's going to happen here. I think that Burford, you look at what Burford did last season, and he started 19 games at right guard as a rookie for the 49ers last year. Played pretty well. He started, in the games that he started early on when Daniel Brunskill wasn't healthy, he played all 100% of the snaps. And then once Brunskill was back and healthy, they started to rotate. And so you saw his snaps get cut, not quite all the way in half, about 60 to 65% of the snaps when Daniel Brunskill was active. And then later on in the season, there was another injury along the offensive line. Brunskill stepped in, and you saw Burford go back to playing all the snaps once again. So it's a little bit of a mix and match here, and we'll see how it all plays out. But the other name too, and this is a really good, and EF Brain comes up. Thank you for the super chat. Perfect timing. It says, can Feliciano play right tackle? Started 15 games last year at center for the Giants. Keep up the great work, Jack. Well, that's kind of where I'm going with this. And this is why I think there might be a possibility that we see Spencer Burford slide to right tackle, is because John Feliciano joins the 49ers as a free agent. He was one of the guys that they kind of targeted going into this. And Feliciano has started a lot of games in the NFL. He started all across the offensive line of scrimmage, with the exception of right tackle. He's played right guard, he's played center, he's played left guard, left tackle. Hasn't played right tackle yet. I don't think they brought him in to play right tackle. When asked about this during the run up to the draft, so we had the pre-draft press conference in Santa Clara, and John Lynch was asked if there's a possibility that we'll see John Feliciano play right guard for the 49ers and be the starting right guard for the 49ers in 2023. And John Lynch's response was, there is a lane to which that can happen. There is a path to that happening for John Feliciano to start at right guard. And so does that path mean that he's competing one-on-one with Spencer Burford only, or does that mean that Spencer Burford is going to slide out the right tackle because they see him as such a good piece to go? You also have Nick Zakelj, who can be a part of this mix as well. Zakelj also gets some reps at center. So there's a lot of things along this offensive line that are a little bit unsettled. The left side to center, I think, is solid. You got Trent Williams, you got Aaron Banks, and you got Jake Brendel at center. But the right guard and the right tackle, we're not 100% sure with that. And like Bob Jones says over here, Feliciano said he wants to start. And I think any free agents, that of Feliciano's talent, they're going to want to start. Same thing with Sam Darnold. They're going to want to start. They're going to want to compete. And that's one of the things, like when Sam Darnold went through his introductory press conference, it sounded to me very much like he was coming in here to compete. And I think you'll see the same thing here with Feliciano. He said he wanted to start, and then she mentions our guy Brad, who did a one-on-one interview with him. So, yeah, absolutely. I think Feliciano, you got to keep an eye on this. I think, like I said, left tackle to center, I think that's set. Right guard to right tackle, that's where there's going to be some competition. So that's why when I put down here offensive line, it's really specific to the right side, right guard and right tackle. And I think those are the primary protagonists in this thing. So, right tackle, McKivitz is going to get the first run. Matt Pryor, Jalen Moore. I think those are the three names that are really being focused on that right side. Nick Zakelj could play that spot as well. Could play right guard. He could play all those spots. And then you have at right guard, Burford maybe sliding out, and then you have Feliciano here as well. So we'll see how that all shakes out. And it's going to start. I think we'll get a good idea during this time period. You remember last year, if you follow the channel, last year, the reports that I had were that Spencer Burford was a part of the starting offensive line from day one. In rookie minicamp, he was the right tackle. In week one of OTAs, he was the starting right guard. He was the right guard from the beginning of OTAs all the way through the the loss in Philadelphia for the NFC Championship game. So we'll get a good idea. We'll get a glimpse here, I think, of what the 49ers are looking like. One other thing to consider here, I don't expect to see Trent Williams tomorrow. So somebody's going to be at left tackle. It'll be interesting to see who that one is. I wouldn't be surprised if it's not Jalen Moore. If Jalen Moore isn't the left tackle, that would be a little bit of a surprise to me. We'll see how that all plays out, but we'll definitely get you guys all updated here. And then really quick, as far as that super chat, EF, I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for that $10 super chat. That was a really good question. You led me right into where I wanted to go. So hopefully I answered your question well, and thank you for sending that in. Let's transition. We got one more spot along the offensive side of the ball that I'm looking forward to seeing how this plays out, and it's going to be running back. You look at the 49ers running back situation, you know who the starter is. That's easy. Christian McCaffrey, he's the guy. He's going to be the starter. But what's going to happen behind him? I think that's where you get into some interesting discussions. You have Elijah Mitchell, who's been really good when he's been healthy. He's explosive. He can take it to the house if you give him a lane. He's really good. The only problem with Elijah Mitchell is he hasn't been able to stay healthy for his first 2 seasons. And that lack of health is one of the reasons why you had Deebo Samuel transition to the backfield back in 2021. Last year, Mitchell being injured is what opened the door for Jordan Mason to step up. And Jordan Mason was able to step up into that closer role, right? He was an undrafted free agent, came in, worked his way through. He basically beat out Ty Davis Price for a spot on the active roster in terms of on the game day active roster. And, as the season rolled on, he became the closer. He became the guy who, when it was late in the game and you needed to just run out the clock and you didn't want, to make sure you held onto the ball and all those types of things. You wanted ball security. That's when Jordan Mason came onto the field, and he did really well in that role. Had a big run up in Seattle, did really good throughout. So really interested to see that battle between Elijah Mitchell and Jordan Mason. I think the 49ers are really strong here. If Mitchell's healthy, Mason's back the same way, and you've got McCaffrey, that's a great 1-2-3 punch. And then you've got Ty Davis Price, who's just kind of there. Davis Price was taken in the 3rd round of the draft back in 2020 last season, and just struggled throughout his rookie year. He only got to carry the ball 34 times. And part of the reason why he only carried it 34 times is because he wasn't going anywhere with it. He only averaged 2.9 yards per rushing attempt. So under 3 yards a carry, when you compare that to the rest of the 49ers running backs, over 4 yards, up around 5 and 6, that's not going to cut it. And that's why I think you're going to look at Ty Davis Price. How much has he improved, or has he improved? One of the things I'll say with Davis Price is he was very impressive last year during training camp with his ability to pass protect. So that piece of the game, I think, is there for him. But you've got to be able to do the running and all that kind of stuff. You've got to be able to find the holes. You've got to be able to get up the field, and that's where he really struggled last year. So you look at the position battles. I think you've got McCaffrey 1, Mitchell, Mason really kind of fighting out for that number 2 role. And then it's a matter of, do the 49ers keep 4 running backs in there? And if they do, then it's going to be Ty Davis Price, I think, competing with Ronald Awatt and Kalen LeBourne, 2 undrafted rookie free agents who the 49ers just brought in this offseason after the draft for that last spot. And I wouldn't put it past the 49ers to go with Awatt or LeBourne over Davis Price. It'd be 2 years, it'd be back-to-back off seasons that the 49ers got rid of a running back they took in the 3rd round the year before as they got into their 2nd year. They just did it last year with Trey Sermon. That could be Ty Davis Price this year. So we'll see how that running back room shakes out. And then, the other spot that's going to be fun to watch is you have Kyle Juszczyk. He's in question fullback. How do the tight ends kind of fill in with that role? But then also the guy to keep an eye on, the jackhammer. That's right. The fullback out of Oregon State. He is Jack Coletto. We didn't really get a chance to see what he could do during the rookie minicamp. I don't think we're really going to see a whole lot out of it this time, because you don't really see there's no hitting at this point. So some of that blocking from the fullback is a little bit limited, but we'll get another chance to see Coletto's athletic ability outside in space and as a receiver and those types of things. And that'll be very interesting to keep an eye on there. But really it's McCaffrey first, and then what happens with Mitchell and Mason. And how does Ty Davis Price look? One other, the other thing too, and I don't have this down as a for a banner on it. But the wide receiver role is going to be interesting too. You look at the wide receiver room, and I think you've got 5 guys locked in there. You've got Brandon Ayuk, you've got Deebo Samuel, Juwan Jennings, and then you have Ray McLeod. Those 4 locked in. And then you have behind that, you have Danny Gray. I think unless the 49ers are only going to carry 5, he's locked in now. And then you have the rookie Ronnie Bell at 6, and there's a bunch of other names that are there. The wide receiver room is going to be interesting. Like I said, I think the first 4 is locked in, and it's really a just question of, are they going to keep 5 or are they going to keep 6? If they keep 6, I think we know who the 6 really are for the most part. And the other thing to remember too, we focus on the 53-man roster so much, but the roster really isn't 53. It's 70. I think it's 75, whatever the number is. I can't remember off the top of my head the number of guys that they can have on the practice squad. But if you're on the practice squad, those guys need to be considered as if they're on the active roster, because the 49ers do a really good job of pulling those guys up throughout the year based on the matchups that they're going to be seeing. So that's the other piece. As we talk through this, and we're focusing primarily, my focus is mostly here is on the starters, but at the same time, start to look at those guys who are going to fulfill the back end of the roster in your practice squad guys. Some of your veteran receivers, that's where they might land. They might keep Danny Gray and Ronnie Bell and have 6 wide receivers deep, but then have another 2 wide receivers on their practice squad. And those guys that are on the practice squad are going to play a couple games while Bell and Gray aren't active, that type of thing. We've seen the 49ers do that quite a bit. So this roster is going to be very interesting to keep an eye on. Let's jump over to the defensive side of the ball. The defense is a little bit easier to look at and predict for the most part. But the one area look at the defensive side, the one for me that's going to be the most interesting to see how this breaks out for the 49ers is linebacker, because they just have so many names over there. We know that Fred Warner, Dre Greenlaw, Oren Burks, those 3 I think are locks to make the final roster. Warner, Greenlaw, they're unquestioned starters. They can play every down. If the 49ers want to just play nickel the entire game, Warner and Greenlaw will be able to do that for them, because they can stop the run and cover the pass. Oren Burks is a lock because I think of his ability to play on special teams. That's one of the main reasons the 49ers brought him in. But he's also really good as a linebacker as well, and he fills that Sam backer role, which is the position that the 49ers will take off the field at times. That's the role that Azeez Al-Shaair played when you had Warner, Greenlaw, and Al-Shaair on the field. That's the role that Burks would fulfill. Now, behind those 3, though, you've got a bunch of names. You got Demetrius Flanagan-Fowles, really good linebacker coming back for the 49ers. Curtis Robinson, a really good linebacker out of Stanford who's been with the team for a couple of years. Then you have Marcelino McCurry-Ball, who was an undrafted rookie free agent last year that shined during the preseason and made a name for himself and looks to possibly make the roster this year. And then you also have the rookies that they just took in the draft, D. Winters and Jalen Graham. And these guys are going to be battling for 2 or 3 roster spots, depending on how many linebackers the 49ers decide to keep. And when I did my way too early roster projection a couple of weeks ago, I had the 49ers keeping 6, and they only kept 1 of Winters and Graham. But we'll see how this all plays out. This is a really good group. Like I said, I can easily see the 49ers going Warner, Greenlaw, Burks, McCurry-Ball, Winters, and Graham, if those are the 6 that they want to keep. The one thing I'll say about the linebackers, having seen Winters and Graham on the field together, I really like Jalen Graham. Jalen Graham's body type and the way that he moves reminds me of Fred Warner. He's not overly built, but he's built at the same time, and he's really smooth, does a really good job of moving. So that jumps out like in a practice like we saw rookie minicamp, where it's a full-on passing league type of game where it's 7-on-7. So for that aspect, that's why I think Jalen Graham looked really good there. The other part of it too is it'll be interesting to see how they work into their run fits and those type of things as we get into tomorrow. So that linebacker group, though, going to be a lot of fun to watch. Again, Warner, Greenlaw, Burks, locks. But what's going to happen between Flanagan-Fowles, Curtis Robinson, McCurry-Ball, Winters, and Graham? That's going to be a lot of competition, and it's going to get started tomorrow. We got a couple of folks that just joined us real quick. They're tardy. Go sit in the corner of the room. Just kidding. How you doing, Lucas? Lucas is a member of the Toolbox. That's why he's got the $ there. So if you want to become a member of the channel, just go ahead and check that out. You got to be on. It's one thing, though, in order to become a member on the YouTube, channel, you can't do it from your phone. You actually have to be utilizing a laptop or a desktop. So check it out. Become a member like Lucas. Lucas comes to us from Austria, and he's always tuned in, and I really appreciate it. So no worries being late. You'll be able to catch the rest of it. Just rewind a little bit after I get finished here, and you'll be able to catch how it all started out. And then Andrew H. also says, sorry, I'm late. Haven't been getting the notifications lately. Let's go, guys. Get it together. I know it's off season. It's okay. It's preseason. It's OTA time. I don't expect this by the time we get to mini camp. You guys better have that on lockdown. But thanks a lot for tuning in. And just to kind of cover it really quick, we did quarterbacks number 1, we did offensive line, specifically the right side, and we did running backs. Those are the 3 that you missed. So if you missed them, go back and check it out. Also, while I'm talking, why don't you guys do me a favor? And as Luke Walsh says here, Cedric Hardman, that like button. Cedric Hardman, an old-time 49ers linebacker. That's why he mentioned it while I was talking about linebackers. But if you guys can do me a favor, hit that like button if you like what you're hearing here on Inside the 49ers with Jack Hammer. As we talk about who the competitions are going to be about during OTAs and which ones to really keep an eye on. And this is the last one that I had. And if there's some other questions you guys want to hit, please feel free to throw those over in the comment section, and I'll make sure I address all your questions as we run through this. So my 5th and final one is defensive end. Some of you might think that this deserved to be number 4 in terms of the ranking, or maybe even defensive end could have been thrown up there, maybe even higher if I had taken away the some of those offensive guys and started jumping around. Defensive end is a need for the 49ers. You look through this. They lost 11.5 sacks this offseason by losing Samson Ebicom, Charles Omenihu, and Jordan Willis. So that's 11.5 sacks. Now, I think the 49ers picked up some sacks with bringing in Javon Hargrave. There's some of those sacks were picked up there. And I do think that when you look at this, Drake Jackson, he's expected to be the first man up. And I would expect Drake Jackson to be the starter. You look at that, and he finished with 3 sacks last year as a rookie, but he wasn't active at all during the 49ers postseason run. They had him on the inactive game day roster, wasn't able to get called up. But the thing with Jackson, he had those 3 sacks. Ebicom, of that group that I just mentioned between Ebicom, Omenihu, and Willis, he had the most. He had 5, I think it was 5 sacks last year. And I think you look at that, and Jackson, with everything he's doing to build himself up and get himself ready for year 2, I think it's really likely that he can get them up to another 2 sacks and match what they were getting from Ebicom in terms of that pass rush side. And I think he also would be able to give them a good base against the run as well, which is something that the 49ers look for in their guys. They don't want them just to play one thing. They want to be able to set the edge in the run game, get after the quarterback in the pass game. And I think Jackson can do that. He hit that rookie wall last year. That's partly why the Friars had him inactive over the last bit of the season there. But in talking to the media during the discussion prior to the beginning of rookie minicamp, Steve Wilkes was asked about Jackson, and he said that Drake has been here all spring working out, doing all the things he needs to do to improve his game. He's gained a lot of weight. He's in there with Chris Kosarek, and I'm just excited to see exactly what he's going to do and how he's going to progress this in his second year. So that's where I am too. I'm really looking forward to seeing what Drake Jackson can do here. If you start to look at the 49ers when it comes to their pass rush, I think you start with Drake Jackson as the next man up. Talanoa Hufanga was that guy this last season, right? 2021 rookie, played okay, stepped into the starting lineup. Nobody really thought a whole lot about it. There was a number of people who I think were worried about what Talanoa Hufanga was going to do on the back end of the Flyers defense. And Hufanga responded by getting named and to a first-team All-Pro in his second year. Now, do I expect to see Drake Jackson get from where he was year 1 to be an All-Pro defensive end for the Flyers? Not necessarily, but if he can come anywhere close to that, that's going to be really good. So let's see. I think if you're looking for a guy who's going to make a breakout in 2023, I think Drake Jackson is a really good one to take a look at. Before we roll on to the ones, we have 187 says, what time is the team presser tomorrow? Practice is at 12, and I believe the presser is at 2. So right around 1:30 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon will be the post post-practice presser. They're gonna practice first, and then we'll be doing the press conference afterwards. So I think it's gonna be right around 2. I'll check that as I continue talking. The other thing here too, with when you look at this pass rush, the other names that the 49ers added, they brought in Clelin Ferrell from the Raiders. They brought in Austin Bryant through free agency. He came over from Detroit. And then they also drafted Robert Beal Jr. in the 5th round. And you look at this one, and the 49ers have a history of guys like Clelin Ferrell being able to come in and help them out right away. They've done this quite a bit. That's where, the joke kind of is Chris Kosarick and the multiple play for Chris Kosarick and how he just gets these guys to work, gets these guys to play well. And so I think that's the hope right now for the 49ers and with Clelin Ferrell, is that they can bring him in and he can be that guy. When you watch Ferrell, this is a guy, he struggled to live up to the expectations of being the 4th overall pick in 2019. He has just 10 sacks in his career to this point, but 32 quarterback hits, 15 tackles for loss. But the one thing about Ferrell, the way that the 49ers play, is he has that ability to play inside and outside. He can line up a defensive tackle sometimes. He can line up a defensive end. And that's very similar to what the 49ers got out of Charles Omenihu the last 2 seasons. So we'll see. I think that might be the role that they envision for Clelin Ferrell. You also have Kerry Hyder Jr. coming back. He has that ability to play inside and outside. And then, I mentioned him earlier and I didn't talk about it now, but like I said, you have Austin Bryant, who's coming over from the Lions. He was taken in the 4th round in 2019. So a couple of guys taken in round 1 and round 4 of the 2019 draft is who the 49ers brought in here. And you watch Bryant, this guy that shows flashes, but he struggled to stay healthy, made just 6 starts in 33 career games. Over the total career, he has only 65 tackles, 7 for loss, and just 4.5 sacks and 11 quarterback hits. So Bryant, I think, is a little bit more on the edge than Clelin Ferrell. And I think that's where Robert Beal Jr. comes in. And Beal's going to be another one of those guys to kind of keep an eye on here. He didn't play much at Georgia. He was a little bit limited there. But he brings some of the things that the 49ers like, especially that GTFO, get the F out of here, off the ball stat, right? Get off the ball quick. And Beal, we haven't really seen a whole lot of that yet because of it's just been the one practice in rookie minicamp. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how Robert Beal Jr. Looks out there. That's one of the things I talked about during my post-practice report during rookie minicamp, was that the rookies look the best of everybody on the field. Well, that's going to change because now you've got the rookies on the field with all the veterans. And it'll be interesting to see which of those rookies continue to show up and which of those rookies blend into the background. So I think that's really things to watch for outside of these 5 position battles, is which rookies are going to step up and show out. We know the guys that looked good were all, like I said, during the rookie minicamp, are the rookies that were drafted. Now what's going to happen when we get to here? So we'll see. It'll be an interesting one. One other thing really quick. I was asked earlier about the time of the post-practice press conference, what time that's going to be taking place. So tomorrow's practice starts at 12:30, and then right around 2 o'clock. So I'd expect probably about 2:15 is when Kyle Shanahan will come to the podium, and they'll have some players joining him afterwards as well. So that'll be the schedule for tomorrow. 12:30 practice, 2 o'clock Kyle Shanahan, and then right after Shanahan, we'll get into I'll give you guys my instant reaction to the practice, maybe even doing as a joint show so you guys get more of the one reaction other than just my own. So we'll see how that works out. But Luke Walsh says, Ferrell has a neat hidden value, instantly discern who has the ball versus play action, read option, RPOs. Hey, if you can do that, that's a really good skill as a defensive end, especially in today's day and age where you're starting to see more teams running the RPOs, even teams that don't have, because an RPO, remember, doesn't require you to have a quarterback that can run. Every quarterback can run RPO. The 49ers ran a lot of RPOs with Jimmy Garoppolo, Mac Jones out in New England, ran a ton of RPOs when he was at Alabama. He's run a bunch of them for the Patriots as well. So when it comes to those RPOs, but that makes it really tough on those defensive ends and linebackers, because they react, and then based on the reaction, the ball goes in the other direction. So that's where it gets tough if you have a quarterback that can do that really well. And the read option, that's kind of the same thing, but that's with the running game instead of the passing game. So a lot of fun stuff. A lot of interesting stuff has happened over the last week. I know this is a focus on OTAs. There was one other discussion this over the weekend. It wasn't on my channel, but I did talk about it. Is when you talk about the quarterback situation with the 49ers, you have Brock Purdy, and I will kind of reiterate something that I said the other day, is that I believe that Brock Purdy for the 49ers, if he can come back and he can be the guy, and Brock Purdy is fully healthy, and Brock Purdy comes back and does everything that he did last year, doesn't fall off, he's able to be efficient by not giving up turnovers, he's able to be efficient with the touchdowns, all those types of things. If that's the guy, if he does that and he's able to play at that level, 49ers keep him healthy, this is the guy that the 49ers go forward with. And the reason, again, is about the cost. It's not about the necessarily the overall play, right? Part of it's the overall play, but the overall play combined with the fact that he's going to cost $3 million against the salary cap for the next 3 years, about $1 million each year. That's a steal for the 49ers for the productivity they got out of the quarterback position last year. And I think in reality, the expectation should be that he's going to be better in year 2. So we'll see how that goes. And, there's a lot of discussion about whether or not he was a dink and dunker. That was the big topic last week. And I'll hit that one real quick, because say what you want about the whole dinker and dunker thing. Don't take it from me. Don't take it from me. I watched the team. I know a hell of a lot about football. Been around it a long time, but don't take the whole dinker and dunker argument from me. Here's the answer I'll give you. He's not a dinker and dunker. He plays the offense and attacks when called for, which is opposite of the definition of dinker and dunker. And again, that's not from me. That's from a guy that's in the Hall of Fame, Kurt Warner. So take it for what it's worth, everybody. Thank you all so much for tuning in. If you guys can do me a favor, please hit that like button before you leave. If you're new to the channel, you like what you see, hit the subscribe button. And after you're done subscribing, make sure you turn your notifications on so you're not late like Lucas and some of these other guys. Make sure you're on time, because if you're on time, you get the best of it, right? Just like when you're in school, you want to make sure you're on time, because the teacher always gives out the best stuff in the beginning. So, thanks again, though, for everybody for tuning in. Again, hit the like button, subscribe, turn those notifications on. Everybody, I appreciate you making the time to check this out. Do me a favor. Make sure you're locked in here to Inside the 49ers with Jack Hammer. You're going to get all your breaking news, all your breaking post-practice reports right here. Take care, everybody, and we'll talk with you soon.